Great to have you all. Good morning again, church. It's great to be here with you and get to praise and to worship alongside you, but also to get to preach. As we're in the second part of this sermon series called This We Believe. And we're talking about humanity created by God. And it's important as we go into this, we're not talking about like a lofty idea of humanity, right? All those people out there, all of humanity. What's really important here is when we're talking about humanity, who are we talking about? Us. You, me, right? Individual people, that humanity was created by God with pleasure indeed, and that he takes pleasure and smiles upon you. So take this not just as a lofty sermon about general humanity. Make sure you take this personally as we go through a couple of different verses that you can kind of follow along with in your Bible. But as we get started, I want to show you a picture. Go to this next picture for me. Great. That's one of my cars, right? That's a 2018 Hyundai Elantra. You can ooh and ah at it all you want. And I'll tell you what, it's a good car. It gets me from place to place, and, well, you know, there's 100,000 other ones like it, right? It's a mass-produced car, right? It comes off the line, and it's funny, actually, just the other day, my son Caleb and I were at Fred Meyer, and we're holding hands, and we walk out, and he walks up to the first silver Hyundai Elantra he sees. And I say, Caleb, that's not our car. So we walk a little bit further, and he just stops. And I look at him, and he points at the car. And I'm like, Caleb, that's another silver Hyundai Elantra. That's not our car, right? So we walk a few more cars down. We finally get to our car. And I say this because it's mass-produced. There's something about cars, but anything in general that's mass-produced. There's nothing really that special about it, right? Nothing about it stands out. It came off a line. It was made by machines. But I'll tell you what, if this was our car, go to the next slide, I'd be able to find it in a heartbeat. Caleb would know where it is. Well, I had that little monster 4-cylinder engine under the hood of that one. This one, you can see, it's got a little bit more horsepower. And what's neat is this is a custom car. And with a custom car, you already know that it's special, right? Someone picked that paint job. Someone went in and they made those custom leather seats, right? They embroidered, they upholstered the interior, right? They picked those wheels. It took care, it took design and intentionality to make something that was completely custom and completely from scratch. But maybe cars aren't your thing. I'll tell you what is my thing are these right here. Next slide. Donuts. I love donuts. Donuts are like my treat. My wife's laughing at me because she knows that's like my favorite kind of treat. I always want a donut. And these are Franz donuts. These are Franz blueberry donuts, right? And I'll tell you what, these are good donuts. You can get them at Costco. You can get them at Smith's. You can get them at Albertsons, Fred Meyer, you name it. You can find Franz donuts anywhere. And for a mass-produced donut, they're pretty good, right? I enjoy them. These are the blueberry ones. But I'll tell you what, these mass-produced donuts are nothing compared to this. Mom's apple pie. Not Costco apple pie, Mom's apple pie. You see, where I grew up in Chicago, it was kind of unusual, but we had an apple tree in our yard. And it didn't grow very big apples, right? And I don't know how it got pollinated, but we got apples every year. And we knew, don't touch the apples. Don't eat any apples. Because right at the end of October, Chris is going to climb and pick every apple off the tree, and Mom is going to make her apple pie. And this apple pie had secrets to the filling. She peeled the apples herself, right? She kneaded the dough and made her own pie crust, and she would make like 5 or 6. They were so good, my dad would take one to work for lunch. That was lunch, apple pie, right? We knew not to pick any. But I'll tell you what, if we had a bake sale here at Grace, I'd probably get MSRP for the donuts, right? What did you buy those for? $3? I'll give you $2.50 because they're a day old. But Mom's apple pie, you'd pay more for the apple pie than you would the donuts, wouldn't you? And why is that? Why would we do that? Well, this pie was made from scratch, right? It's special. We intrinsically know that something that was made from scratch or by the hands of somebody else, someone who intimately got involved with the making of something, whether it's a custom car or an apple pie, you know it's more valuable. You know it's more valuable than something that's just mass produced. And the main difference between my Hyundai Elantra and the custom car, the main difference between the Franz donuts and the apple pie is that very thing. Intimacy. The intimacy in which it was created. Because it goes into Genesis in the way that which we were created, right? You can go to the next slide. The story of creation, God mass produces the entire universe, right? Just I'd say the drop of a hat, but it's just the speaking of a word. Because here we read, God said, let there be light. And there was light, and God said that was good. Then God said, let there be sky, water, and land. So there was sky, water, and land. And God said, that's good. Then God made vegetation and animals and stars. He spoke them all into being, and he said, hey, that's good. Just at one word, God was able to mass produce the entire universe. All the stars in the sky, the things that we call so beautiful, the waters, the ocean that we look upon with awe of how beautiful it is. All just in one word. But then God stops. And with his very own hands, he picks up the dust of the earth. And with that, personally, right, like a custom job, he forms them with his very own hands. God makes humanity. And God breathes into humanity his very own spirit, his very own breath. In the Septuagint, which is an all-Greek Bible, right, the first Bible that was all in Greek, the earliest manuscripts, right, in Genesis, the word used here is pneuma. And I say that to you because it's not just breath, like CPR, I'm breathing into you. That word means spirit. It means essence, right? It means a part of who God is. He breathes into you, his very own spirit. We call that a soul, right? The very essence of God, he takes from himself and breathes into humanity. It's unlike anything God had ever created before. Right? I say that because I know I skipped my blanks, and some of you are blank hungry, so I'll tell you, right? It's this. You're not mass produced. You are a custom job. Because God created us in his very own image, but we tend to take that word image and we think it's only skin deep. And that's where this point gets really important here, because I look at all of you. And too often we don't look at ourselves with enough value, but I say to you, you are a custom job. You are mom's apple pie. You are that custom car. You were made from scratch. Care and time and design went into the creation of you. And yes, he looked upon you, humanity. He looked upon us. And with a smile, he looked upon us, and whom even the angels are envious of, the very pinnacle of creation. And he said, now that's very good. He made you and said, you are very good. And what they said with that last line right there, right? We often tend to think that image is only skin deep, right? That it's only surface level is how we use the word. Get it? Skin deep? All right, good. Over here, because we talk about when God forms us, right? Can you go back to my little people? As we go back to our little people, right? God forming us with his hands, we tend to think, well, God must look like a handsome 34-year-old man with slightly blonde hair and a little bit of gray in his beard. He's like a 7.5 out of 10 on the handsome scale. Maybe not, right? Or we tend to think God must look just like us. He must be a brunette with green eyes, right? He must have glasses. He must have a goatee. He must have blonde hair. We tend to think God has got to be male or female, or that he must somehow be human. Why? Well, we're made in the image of God and we're human. And that's where we're missing the point. We're missing the pneuma. We're missing the essence, the soul of what God has created, right? When he formed us, he breathed his essence into us. You are made in the image of God, and I'm talking about the imprint that's on your soul. Just like an artist paints a picture and they sign in the bottom corner. That's you, that signature that God had when he created you. He put that signature upon you. And I say that because I said this already, we don't look upon ourselves with enough value, but especially as we grow older, but especially I even say, like as I work in a middle school, younger people don't quite see the value that they have in the eyes of God. We tend to only see the value that we have in comparison to what we're looking at, what we see with our image. But I'm telling you, you're so much more than that. You have a soul, and yes, God did form our bodies. One day these bodies are going to fail us. One day these bodies will die. But the soul, though, the soul doesn't die. Right? When we say God gives us his very own image, God is eternal. And that soul within you is also eternal. And God will restore and raise that body again, and that soul and that body will be really reunited. And that brings us to our next point over here, point 2, which is this. You're not trash, you're restored. God created you on purpose. We live in a throwaway society. And that's why it's important to hear that you were made on purpose. Right? If I go to this picture over here, right? I see this and I see a rusty bucket of bolts. And we tend to honestly see ourselves as this sometimes. Why? Well, I'm rusty. Honestly, I creak when I wake up in the morning, right? I've got a couple dings. I've got a couple dents, right? There are things wrong with me, just like this car. Yet I know some of you guys out here are car guys, right? And when you see a car like this, right, a car guy doesn't see the dents and the dings or the missing headlights. They see again that essence of what the car was. More so, they see what it looks like when that car has been restored. They can see what that car will look like when it's restored. Because as I told you all these really nice fluffy things about how we're made in the image of God and he formed us with his hand, it's like, oh, that's so nice. It makes me feel good. Honestly, some of us are thinking, hold on, Pastor Chris. I don't like the custom job that God did on me. Right? I don't like the custom job that God did on a friend of mine because, honestly, I look at it, he must have made a few mistakes. It's just like when cars come off the line, there's a couple lemons in there. I mean, I look at a friend, and I see a friend with a medical condition, whether it's autoimmune or something deeper. I see a family member or relative that doesn't quite function well mentally. Maybe it's schizophrenia. Maybe it's some sort of mental disorder. Or you know someone close to you, maybe that has a physical issue or deformity or an amputation, and you hear all those warm, fuzzy words, and you're like, Pastor Chris, if we're being made in the image of God, then he must have dropped a few of us along the way or broke something off in the mold. You know, you'll hear about this more next week, but next week we're talking about this was what we believe. And we'll talk about sin next week. Pastor Daniel will really kind of bring that around. But a little preview for you is this, right? We see the effects of sin in the world around us, but also upon humanity, right? Upon who we are. We went over this in Bible class today. In Isaiah 24, we read that the earth had a curse placed upon it by its inhabitants. Pop quiz, who are the inhabitants? I know, some of you don't want to give the answer. That's fine, right? It's us, right? Original sin brought on by that fall, we've brought a curse along with us, and we see that curse upon the earth, but we see its effects upon humanity through bodies and minds that are broken. Our bodies, when they get old and they creak and they ache, when we get sick. Honestly, some people live longer than others, and we can't tell why that's fair. You know, when we see cars like this, I see a rusty bucket of bolts, I see trash. Why? Because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. We see that about life, too. Now, all of a sudden, we place a value upon life, right? Conception or whatever you want to put it, or when the elderly get too old or mentally inept. All of a sudden, we have a value we place upon life and humanity that we feel is broken. Because when things are broken, we feel like it's trash. I have a picture to show you. Go to the next one. This is a picture of my vacuum. It's not like at home. That's not like my wife's feet, like vacuuming. But it's a really nice vacuum. And I have to tell you, like, we didn't get this vacuum till we moved here. Our other vacuum is, golly, it's old. I say it's old. It's 10 years old. But when we got married, it was a gift. And the first week we had it, we were vacuuming like vacuums do, and like something shorted on it. Or we ran it too long, and it shorted out, and it broke. And it was broken for all the way till we got a new one. And that sounds weird because now you're like, they never vacuumed then. And you're right. And that was a time for confession, and you should forgive me. But if you come to our house now, it's well vacuumed because we got this awesome new vacuum. She's a little embarrassed, but it was less embarrassing at 8:30. But when we use this vacuum, it does exactly what a vacuum should do. It's really nice. It sucks things up. It's good. Life is good. We have a great vacuum. We vacuum everything well. But you know what I do with that old vacuum? Throw it away. It's been broken forever. I never took the time to try and figure out what was wrong with it or really how to fix it. And I show you this picture because I want to show you another one, and it's this. Anyone recognize one of those? Yeah, okay, good. Some of you. This is my parents' vacuum, right? It's a 40-year-old vacuum, if not older than that. Ours was brown, all right? It still is brown, right? I don't have a picture of that exact one for you, but I bring that up to you for this, right? Because I say we live in a throwaway society. Growing up with that vacuum, I want to bring attention to the things that we've lost, and it's this. My dad has fixed that vacuum more times than I could count. That vacuum is so old, it's older than I am. My grandfather gave it to my parents. It has an attachment which you can use to shine your shoes, right? That's when it was that important. We're all wearing like sneakers. You don't really shine your sneakers, right? But you could shine your leather shoes with this vacuum. And we lived in it was always the kids' job to vacuum, and we lived in it's kind of a skinny, but it's like a 3-story house. And it was always stored on the 3rd floor in like a side closet. And if it's the kid's job to vacuum, how well do you think that vacuum got carried down the stairs? I kept throwing it down the stairs until I was told not to throw it down the stairs anymore, right? And when we use it, what do you think kids do when they vacuum? Right? We're sucking up everything. We got Band-Aids. We got Pogs. We've got beads. Do you hear that, Pogs? You guys know what Pogs are? Right? Beads, rubber bands, everything. And what happened when that vacuum broke? They fixed it. My dad would replace the rollers in it. Then he would replace the bag, or he would patch the bag. Even the parts where it broke on the top, he would tape it or glue it, right? He'd replace the belts into it. And I say that to show you that with my vacuum and that vacuum, well, we live in a throwaway society, don't we? And I'm a victim of it, right? I threw a vacuum out. Confession number 2, we had a really nice toaster that we got for our wedding. It was metal, and it looked cool, and it had these little wide things on it that you could put like pancakes in. And we used that toaster all the time, and then it broke. And I put it in the garage saying, I'm going to fix that toaster. You watch me. And I ordered a new one on Amazon. And it's funny, I kind of regret throwing that toaster away because I never fixed it. And I never figured out what was wrong with it. So when we moved, I tossed it. And I say that again because, well, things are trash when they don't do what they're supposed to, right? When something's broken and it no longer functions, we throw it away. And we tend to say that, like I said, even about human life and human beings. But I thank God that we have a God that does this. Right? There we are, our before picture. Well, I say before picture, that's our now picture, isn't it? Right? Rusty and dinged up. I see that car, and honestly, you know what I do with it? I throw it away. That thing's trash. That thing's garbage. It doesn't do what it's supposed to anymore because, well, it's broken. And honestly, humanity is broken, and who broke it? We did. So maybe it's my fault, but I would throw it away. But we have a God instead who steps in and sees that. Just like a car guy sees the essence of what that car could be. We have a God who looks upon what he created, that eternal soul that he made an imprint of. He sees you, and he knows he didn't make any mistakes. He doesn't look at humanity and said, I let a couple lemons get by. God sees past the rust, the brokenness, the dings, the dents, and he sees what he will restore. Right? He sees what he will restore, what Jesus died for. So indeed, we could be raised again, not just the soul, but also the body. The body will end up being nice, just like that. We too will be restored. And in 1 Peter, we read this. And after you have suffered a little while, and we can all agree maybe we've suffered a little bit for a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Jesus Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. And you will hear it's indeed by that blood and sacrifice of Jesus you are redeemed and you are restored. Because it brings us to our third point over here, and it's this. You are not just built for today, you're built for eternity. And God is so jealous for his creation, And often, we only consider gratifying the immediate. We consider gratifying the immediate rather than having the perspective of eternity. You might have heard this phrase once or twice. Maybe it's not as popular nowadays, but it goes like this. YOLO. YOLO means you only live once. You only live once. So why not gratify the desires? And I say it with a smile, but we believe it, don't we? Right? There are moments where we live like this is the only life we have to live. Where we have to gratify those immediate desires because we see this person and we laugh. Anyone seen this movie? Maybe a few times? Who is that? Who said Veruca? A+, nicely done, right? Veruca Salt, right? She sings this. This is in the old classic Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. What song does she sing? I want it now, don't care how. I want it now. And we laugh and we think she's stupid, right? Because she wants a golden egg and goes down, and honestly, it's really terrifying. She goes to an incinerator. I hope she's okay, right? But we see her and we can laugh at it because we're like, that's stupid, but we also laugh because, yeah, that's me. Yeah, you know what? I do see that. The sermon series came up, and Pastor Dinger referenced this because we're talking about spiritual drift. Spiritual drift, right? We're kind of addressing it because when we give into that immediate desire, we tend to drift just a little bit every single time. Sadly, we're like a car with a bad GPS. You can go to the next slide for me. If you've ever seen this scene, it's in The Office, right? Where they punch in a location on their GPS and they're following the GPS. And they get to a part where there's a lake. And Dwight's like, there's no road here. And he just can't, Steve Carell can't think. And he just follows the GPS and drives into the lake. Because the GPS says there's a road there. We are like a car with a bad GPS. And I say that because we tend to turn a little bit too often. I'm punching my destination. I'm going 15 minutes across town. Okay, it's a straight line, but, okay, it says turn here. I'm going to turn here. Ooh, look at that. That's nice. Oh, turn here again. Oh, turn here again. What happens when you have a destination in mind and you keep turning away from it on your GPS? What happens? You get lost. The destination gets further away, both in time and in distance, doesn't it? And as we talk about spiritual drift, we're talking about God being the path and Christ being the destination. The more we turn away, the further away we get, the more we feel lost and unsure and wonder about how we got here. You can go to the next slide. A couple weeks ago, I was out hiking. You guys have been out hiking. What's an important thing to do while you're hiking? Know where you're going. Stay on the trail. It's so basic you wouldn't think of it, right? When you're hiking, stay on the trail. And I'll tell you what, I hiked Mount Bora a couple weeks ago, and we stayed on the trail all the way up the mountain, and we celebrated. It was great. Then we came down the mountain, and we got to Chicken Out Ridge again, and the guy I was with said, I heard somewhere around here you can just kind of go down the skeet, right? Ski down the mountain, meaning there's not with skis, but there's layers of rock upon each other, and you can sit on it and kind of skid your way all the way back down the mountain to where the trees are and the side of the mountain. When you get all the way down to where the trees are, you cut a bunch of time out and you can kind of walk along the tree line back to your car. And I'm like, there's something in the back of my mind telling me, don't do it. That was God. But I went, you know what? You know what you're doing. I'll follow you. That's fine. So we went off the trail. And we went down this skeet, and I'm following them, and we're like kind of sliding down all these layers of rocks, and it's cool. I feel cool. I got pants and cool hiking shoes, and we're going down, and all of a sudden, about a quarter of the way down the mountain, he jumps off to the side and grabs hold of something. And I go a little bit further than him, like, why did he stop? He must have got a rock in his pants or something. And I look, and there's a cliff. And I then just sprawl out. I'll never do this again, by the way, right? I sprawl out, praying that God's going to save me from this cliff, and I stop. And we literally it takes almost an hour and a half to roll across this mountain because you can't get any stable footing. All the rocks are sliding. Keep shaking your head at me. I know. I feel it for you, okay? And we're rolling across, and I can't get any stable footing. And since he's ahead of me, whatever stable footing he gets it. And then when he leaves it, it just drops off this cliff. And I'm praying for God to save me this whole time. Because what happens when you go off the path? You get lost. And I'll tell you what, I was frightened. I was so frightened. I'm like, what am I doing? And when you get off the path, what do you say when you're lost? How did I get here? I'm laying on these rocks going, Lord, how did I get here? But even when you're lost and you're in the forest, in the woods, when you've turned your heart away from God and you're back to God and you keep going down a path, there's parts of life you get to that are so dark and they're so lost, and you just stand there and go, how did I get here? Thankfully, God saved me. He must have thought you needed me. That's not why. He's like, this guy's an idiot, but I'll save him this time, is really what happened, right? But we say this and we become frightened. But why do we become frightened when we've turned our heart away from God and we've entered into a dark place and we're lost? It's not because of YOLO. It's not because you think you only have one life to live. It's in fact, you feel that you were made for eternity. I feel I was made from eternity, and when I've wandered down this dark path, eternity happens in one of two ways. And we become afraid of it because, number one, eternity is either with God, or number two, eternity is separated from God. If you read into that, we call that hell, is what it is. We tend to think hell is the fire and the pitchforks and the dancing devils, right? What hell is an eternal separation from God and all his great blessings he's bestowed upon humanity. And I bring that up to you. Yes, it's dark, and yes, it's scary. But I bring that up to you because we say God is jealous for his creation, not of his creation, right? To be jealous of is like I'm jealous of Aaron over here because he has such a great tie and I want it, right? God is not jealous of the things we have. God is jealous for us. We are the possession that God wants to have back. We are the ones that he wants to desire us to be with. And he says that because you were built for eternity. God doesn't want you to be eternally separated from him. He doesn't want humanity to be eternally separated from him. God wants and desires and is jealous for you, for us, to be with him for eternity. And that's where we read here in Isaiah 43. But now, thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine. We hear that because God is saying, fear not. Fear not when you feel lost and dark. Fear not when you feel banged up or dinged or dented or rusty. Fear not when you feel unworthy. Fear not when you feel worthless. Fear not. You may have strayed away from the path, but God calls you back into the light. He takes you away from the detours. He calls you back from the darkness. He yells to you, fear not. I call you by your name. I have redeemed you, as he calls you back to the path. I've redeemed you through the blood of my own Son, Jesus Christ. That's how great a value you have to me. I am so jealous for you, and I want you back so badly, I would pay anything for you because you are mine. Jesus tells us in John 16:33, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you may have tribulation, right? In the world you may veer off into a place that seems so dark you don't know a way back. But take heart, I have overcome the world. I have overcome the world to redeem you, to call you back to me. You see, Jesus overcame the world to redeem us, so we indeed would again be a possession of God. And it's that possession of God, that creation, that he so carefully constructed with his very own hands, giving us an eternal soul, a piece of his very own spirit instilled within us, and a promise of restoration. Right? Uniting our souls again with our bodies, that although they may seem broken, dented, and rusty now, the Lord will restore. He will make again like new. And instead of seeing us as trash or lost, he calls us by name, knowing how intimately he created us. And I tell you, remember that you're that creation. You are the apple pie. You are that custom car. You're a work of art, so precious in the eyes of God that he would pay with his very own blood to have you back, so we can join him in the way that he intended for all eternity as he created us to be. Pray this all in God's name, and all of God's people said, Amen.